Victoria College, a landmark on the Jersey horizon, has stood proudly high on Montmirail since the middle of the 19th century. The state visit of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in 1846 was the catalyst for the creation of the college, but the notion had been discussed many years earlier. It was in 1596 that Lawrence Baudin first put forward the proposition that there should be a college in Jersey. He had the support of the governor, Sir Walter Raleigh, but despite that, the project floundered. In 1669, the scheme resurfaced when Sir George Carteret found a way of paying for the college, ampo. He persuaded Charles II to impose a duty on wine, brandy, cider and apples. The first £150 each year was assigned directly to the college. But it still took almost 2 centuries for the dream to become reality, and even then only by the slimmest of margins. At the time, many families were sending their sons to France to be educated, and a college on the island would save great expense. But states members were still split on the need, despite the fact it was noted that there was a marked superiority in the education of the Guernsey men. The plan was eventually passed on the casting vote of the bailiff, and in May 1850, 20,000 people turned up to witness the foundation stone being laid. In September 1852, the college was finally opened. The Lieutenant Governor presented copies of Winterhalter's portraits of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert to the college, and these can still be seen hanging in the Great Hall. The first principal was William George Henderson, who was appointed on the princely salary of £500 a year, plus £1 for each pupil in the school. In addition, 4 masters were appointed to teach the subjects to the 109 students who attended that first term.
It was founded as an English-run public school, or modelled on an English public school, with English being the language of teaching, in virtually a French-speaking island. That's sometimes forgotten.
In 1859, the Queen paid an impromptu visit to the school bearing her name. It was her last visit to the island, but not the last time that Victoria College received a royal visitor. In 1921, Victoria's grandson King George V and his Queen, Mary, became the second ruling monarch to set foot in the grounds. In 1935, it was the turn of the heir to the throne, Prince Edward, to pay a visit, one of the last official duties he performed before his ascension and subsequent abdication of the throne of Britain.
Over 6,000 school children gathered at Victoria College playing field. All of them were provided with Union flags to wave. But before he addressed them, the Prince travelled across the road for the main event of the day, the official opening of the Howard Hall. In the quadrangle, he inspected the Guard of Honour from the college's Officer Training Corps, which had been drawn up by Captain Eden. And there were loud cheers of God Save the Prince of Wales when the Prince crossed the road and addressed the island's school children, and even louder cheers as he announced a public holiday.
In 1957, Queen Elizabeth II visited for the first time and left many memories.
And John Lamarck and I had to hie up from the lunch at West Park and went up, of course, to be there when the Queen came. And I think people thought we were some sort of forerunner of the royal party, so they waved and cheered as we went up Mount Bingham. That's what I remember there. I remember, of course, also Philip Le Brocq.
I was lucky again both to be one of the head boy in 1957 when the Queen came, and my father had done the same in 1922, so my speech had a nice little link.
Now the official visitor for Victoria College, the Queen has been back several times to call on the school, including in 1989 when the whole school gathered in the grounds to hear an address.
Martin Devonport, now one of the college's longest-serving headmasters, has hosted royal visitors before and obviously knew the protocol inside out. Both the prep and the college and their families were assembled in front of that most famous facade, but perhaps the most daunting task went to head boy Michael Hedditch to present the loyal address.
We rejoice that today is the second occasion during Her Majesty's reign on which you have honoured the college with your royal presence. We retain the happiest of memories of the last visit, 32 years ago, when we were honoured by your royal presence and that of His Royal Highness.
Her Majesty then went on to present the prizes that date back to her great-great-grandmother and college founder Queen Victoria. The Classics Prize, though, has now been replaced by Science. The college visitors' book was graced by another royal signature, and as if the occasion wasn't enough, the headmaster of the college had more good news for all assembled.
I have the honour to announce that Her Majesty wishes her visit to be be commemorated by an extra day's holiday.
5 Victoria College boys were praised for their hard work over the last year as their Sovereign Lady presented them with special awards. It's the third time the Queen's visited Victoria College and the whole school turned out to welcome her. Older boys and staff were all out in their finery for this very special award ceremony, as everyone wanted to capture a glimpse of the historic moment.
One of the most memorable royal visits was that of Princess Anne in 1972. Here to open the new science labs, she'd lost her voice and was struggling to make herself heard. But all the boys did manage to hear the most important words.
I am happy to tell you that the headmaster has agreed to my request that you should have 2 days extra holiday.
The royal visits may have left a lasting impression on those boys who were there, but one element of school life no one from any school will ever forget is teachers.
So many of the staff then looked on themselves not just as teachers but as school masters, sort of developing the whole person.
Well, education is about communicating to students, and I think any teacher worth his salt will change his attitude, but in response to the child.
The school has changed, but the nature of the job hasn't changed.
It's like being on stage, actually. You are constantly acting, as it were, to an audience, and you've got to respond to that audience to get the best out of them.
One of the things about the college was that they had teachers of fairly strong characters up there.
There was a Mr. Fowler,
who naturally was called Chick, but once somebody tried it onto his face.
Eric Train was in my class, and this short, rather than insignificant looking teacher walked in and announced himself. "Good morning, my name is Fowler." Eric from the back row said, "Morning, Chick." We never did it again.
There were a lot of characters who'd sort of been involved in certainly the Second World War, and I think even in the First World War, who'd sort of gone into teaching.
One particular gentleman, Colonel Finch, he was a lovely man.
He had quite an explosive temper, and you never really knew perhaps when this temper was likely to erupt.
He'd walk into class and say, "Right, gentlemen, I'll put you into the picture. I've had hardly any sleep during the night. Anybody who misbehaves is going to be dealt with."
So being in classes with him was rather like having an unexploded bomb in the classroom. You never knew when things were really going to get pretty exciting.
And there was another one called Mr. Cadet, and he was called Punch. And the reason why he was called Punch,
you were not supposed to run. He walked round with his fist clenched like that,
so that a small boy running round a corner would meet it.
And if you ran into it, as you inevitably did, running round corners too fast, he just smiled blandly at you and said, "You know you're not supposed to run." Didn't punish you. You'd had enough with a bruised face.
In those days, of course, Ronnie Postel was headmaster, and he'd appointed quite a number of ex-Army, ex-RAF, ex-naval staff.
Headmaster, when I first moved up there, was Ronnie Postel. Again, he had quite a reputation, quite a name. So, you'd heard all these stories, and you were really moving up to see if it was all real.
The headmaster became Mr. P.A. Tatum, or Pat, obviously, P.A.T.
He taught geography, and he taught geography from a green-bound textbook. It was by a gentleman by the name of Dudley Stamp.
If you understood him, you could get away with what you wanted. If you sat in the front row and didn't put your satchels, as they were then, which he called panniers, on the desk, you could cheat, if you wanted to. If you sat in the back row and put your satchels up in front, he was sure you were going to cheat. So it's psychological warfare.
Teachers who used to use the blackboard duster as a weapon for subduing the classes and that kind of thing.
Pop Horn, I think he was known as.
Yes, there was discipline, and something that I certainly valued, and something that was part of my teaching life as well. I was a bit of a disciplinarian.
The style of teaching has certainly changed over the years in keeping with the changing face of education. If Queen Victoria were able to visit today, she'd be looking at a very different college.
With this experiment, I want to illustrate the principles of catalysis. As you know, aluminium and iodine don't normally react. However, when we add some water to them, you can see that the reaction will occur quite vigorously. So we open the door now.
The recently opened science building, which houses the laboratories and workshop in which the school trains the younger generation in science. The new building is said to offer modern facilities the equal of any school in the British Isles. But what makes it unique? I put the question to the senior science master, Brian Tricker.
I would say that apart from the equipment, it's the assembly under one roof of a wide range of materials for practical facilities. The boys, of course, experiment much as they would in any school, into the principles of heat, light and sound. But what we want to do is to bring out the principles in practice. For instance, in the workshop, we have a wide range of practical facilities in terms of mechanized tools. Here is a lathe, just as you might find in any industrial workshop. One of the technicians is instructing a boy in its use at the moment. Can you make it rotate a little slower, yeah? I don't think it's any slower. No, just try it, will you? No, you're quite right, actually. We also have an inheritance of old equipment, such as this drill. There's nothing wrong with something merely because it's old, and we maintain these sort of things as long as they can do their job. This engine has been prepared for display purposes by two of the boys. It's capable of showing the valve action and the piston action, and it shows also the water cooling system. The parts of the engine are a study in themselves for O-level. There's a vehicle inspection pit here, so that we can get down and have a look at the underneath of these vehicles. This particular engine, which I hope is in running order, belongs to the Victoria College Army Cadets.
Today they're working with acrylic and they're making a simple coat hook, which will be one lesson long. They've just finished their stall projects, which are on the side over there, so we're now focusing more on individual materials. Today's plastic, next lesson will be metal, so it'll be one-off small lessons. We follow the exam specifications from the exam boards. Within that we can choose our own themes. We have two themes which we generally use. One is storage and the other one is board games. We do two GCSEs, one is in graphics and one is in resistant materials, so the storage is resistant materials and the board games are the graphics.
On Thursdays, because that's when I got drama, I think, oh yes, we got drama today.
At the moment I'm in Animal Farm. No, I'm playing the part as Muriel on the white goat.
I'm Old Major, and because he dies quite early on, I come on again as Mr. Whimper.
I actually really do like drama, and I think it's one of my main abilities.
I'd like to be an actor when I finish school. Mrs. Crow down in Prep, she's a music teacher there. She helped me a lot, and last year, just before year 7, I started playing the saxophone, and I started playing the piano when I was about 5.
There are regular concerts and things, and it's taken seriously and things, yeah.
There are lots of after-school and in-school activities, and the play, Animal Farm, is coming up, and there's some music in that as well.
It's a very fun occasion, even for the people who don't enjoy music. It's extremely enjoyable, and gets the houses working together, and very good sense of spirit around here.
Yeah, I'd like to be a composer. I want to compose film musics. I'd like to do that.
Well, I would like to be a film composer, sort of, or for television or something. I think that's where the money is, and also I enjoy composing. So, yeah.
Before I arrived here a few years ago, I'd never really done art, and I was quite nervous because I had to start the whole GCSE thing really from scratch. And the teachers here have been so useful, you know, they developed all my skills and made sure I knew, you know, how to do these basic techniques of drawing and painting. And then, I think more importantly, they've just let me get on with what I felt like doing. You know, there's one of the great strengths of the department is there's so much freedom here. You know, to let me do a 24-foot long nude for my final exam is quite extraordinary. I didn't think many other art departments would even think of letting me do it.
College's own version of Lads Army is the Combined Cadet Force, or CCF, which this year is another section of the school with something to celebrate, their centenary. Starting life as the OTC, or Officers Training Corps, life in the CCF certainly isn't mundane.
I've been in the CCF from the very beginning, and I've risen up through the ranks to get my sergeant tabs, and I've been actively involved throughout the whole sort of 3 or 4 years.
There's loads of opportunities. You've got lots of different courses, like parachuting and tank driving.
Gliding scholarships. I've got my wings, gone solo. Friends have been flying.
Campcraft, map and compass, and then teamwork skills. Quite hard to imagine college without the CCF.
In the cadet force, you know, the CCF, where there were a lot of adventures to be had.
If you were in the CCF, you weren't doing English, French, Latin, German or whatever.
Colonel Hammond, who was the sort of senior officer when I was there, and the RSM, a guy called Mr. Mustow, Frank Mustow, and he was a sort of a Cockney bloke, you know, from somewhere in London.
Annual camps were quite good memories. I've sort of still got my little logbook that I made from a visit to Manston in Kent.
Brecon beacons or the canals around Pontivy in canoes.
We went to Exeter, Topsham Barracks at Exeter for 15 shillings return.
Colonel Hammond, who was, you know, quite an officer-like person, was in stark contrast to this guy from East London, you know, RSM Mustow.
I was allowed as I can't imagine it now, as CSM, to go up to London on my own, to see Laurence Olivier in Titus Andronicus, doss down in some totally unknown doss house and come back in time for the 9 o'clock parade.
I'd sort of made up my mind anyway that you know, my career was going to be flying Spitfires. We also did quite a bit of flying in the Chipmunks, and I have in my logbook that I flew in one called Thud and Blunder, which was fairly appropriate because it was after a very large lunch and the pilot decided he was going to do aerobatics over Ramsgate, at which point my lunch decided that it wasn't going to stay inside me.
In the summer we were allowed to wear shirt sleeve order, but that simply meant you took off one thick heavy layer of wool, but you were still left with these, they were called Hairy Marys, and they were woolen shirts.
I can just remember the horrible shirts we had to wear, the old CCF shirts. They were the most uncomfortable things you could ever imagine.
The ability to read an ordnance survey map proved a great deal of use. The ability to strip a Bren gun and reassemble it in 2.5 minutes, I haven't had a lot of call for.
Many OVs have lost their lives in action, particularly in World War I, and their names are immortalised on the base of the statue of Sir Galahad in the Quad. CCF members are expected to keep the high standards and discipline that would be expected in the armed forces, and they regularly go on parade for inspection. In 1970, it was the turn of the Air Force section to face inspection by Jersey's Governor, Air Chief Marshal Sir John Davis.
Victoria College in Jersey. A place of learning, yes, that's well known. But it's also a place where education in a wider sense is given, in all sorts of practical ways. Some of the boys are members of the Royal Air Force section of the Combined Cadet Corps. And recently they were on parade for an inspection by His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor of the island. It happens every year at Victoria College, an inspection by either the Army Command or by the Royal Air Force. And an inspection means it's an occasion for a perfect turnout, exactly the same as for an Army or Royal Air Force station anywhere in the British Isles. And His Excellency was at one time Air Officer commanding all RAF training. And now some of the boys after the inspection are detailed for a demonstration drill of a special kind, and a squad of air cadets go marching over to the other side of the Victoria College playing field, where the cadet force keeps a service training glider. It's used for instruction in the basic principles of flight. Each piece clicks into place and is held in position by steel wire rigging. The glider can be assembled and ready to fly in 9 minutes if all goes well, and it's a matter of pride among the boys if this timing can be achieved. Over in the college buildings, other cadets are in a classroom where the theory of flying is taught from models. The master in charge of the air cadets is Philip Windram, who is also a flying officer in the RAF Reserve.
The airfield table that you see here was built by Victoria College cadets, and it's used to instruct in airfield procedures and how circuits are flown. With the aid of these lights that you see here, night flying procedures are also instructed and how landings are carried out. This is a model aircraft engine which is going to be used to power the model aircraft that is being built by the boys at the moment. It is going to be flown out of doors by radio control, and the radio control transmitter and receiver is being built at the same time by the cadets. The computer that you see here is used by aircrew for navigational purposes. It's a sort of pilot slide rule, in fact. One of the things you can do with it, for instance, is to feed in your heading and airspeed on this central dial, and having fed in your wind velocity data, by rotating the dial, you can then compute your track and ground speed.
Why do you think the boys at school ought to be trained in this way?
I think there are two main aspects. First of all, it trains them to be self-reliant and to cope with situations. The older ones, for example, are put in charge of organising activities and running the juniors, and this is a very valuable part of their education, no matter what they're going to do later on in life. Secondly, it's a very good introduction to aviation in general, and specifically to the RAF. They see plenty of service life when they go to camp and on gliding courses and so on, and they learn all about the technical aspects of flying here.
The glider is assembled and ready for one of the cadets to take his place in the pilot's seat. Only selected cadets can fly, those who've proved themselves able to control the glider on test runs along the ground. Even on a short flight in the field, the proficiency of the cadet must reach RAF standards. The elastic rope is pulled out by the launching squad until it's at full stretch, and then the cadets stand firm until the pilot releases the ground attachment and takes off. Among the college air cadets are two with professional licenses. They learn to fly at the Jersey Aero Club, out at the airport, receiving free tuition under a scheme sponsored by the State's Defence Committee. The Bassett light aircraft used by RAF personnel when they fly into Jersey to visit the cadet force at Victoria College, and used too for taking the cadets up for flights round the islands. Another famous plane from the last war, the Lancaster Bomber, one of the fleet of raiders which once made the airstrikes on distant targets far from the airfields of Britain, a part of the history of the Royal Air Force. Well, there you are. That's the way the youngsters are training today, if they're in the Royal Air Force section of the Combined Cadet Corps at Victoria College. Just one of the ways the boys are learning about the modern age they live in.
Teachers may come and go, but one thing that stays with the pupils throughout their time at college is the house that they join. Pre-World War I, an attempt had been made to split the boys into groups to make them more manageable and to encourage competition. However, the divide of the country, North Town and South Town, created houses of very unequal numbers. Just after the end of the war, it was decided to rectify this, and the 4 houses were founded, bringing sporting and dramatic life to the fore. Each house was named after an old Victorian who had served his country with some distinction. Braithwaite is named after Lieutenant General Sir Walter Braithwaite. He served as an officer in the army for more than 40 years, reaching the rank of general in 1926. Lieutenant William Bruce was another to lend his name to a house. He left college in 1908 to head to Sandhurst. He was killed on the Western Front before being posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions in December 1914, when he led a small group of men to capture an enemy trench. One of the proudest moments for the school came in 1992. A group of former pupils raised enough funds to enable them to bid for Bruce's medal collection at Christie's. It included the Victoria Cross that he had been awarded for conspicuous bravery and devotion to duty. The bid was successful.
When we first heard that we've actually managed to get the medal, and this was obtained for us by an old Victorian, Stanley Stride, in London, who was bidding at Christie's for us, we were delighted. In fact, I don't mind telling you that a couple of us burst into tears. We were so thrilled, absolutely delighted.
Dunlop is named after a family rather than one person. Between 1883 and 1900, 8 brothers were educated at the school. 5 of these died whilst on active service, 3 during World War I, 1 in the Boer War and another in West Africa. Sartorius is another house to be named after a family rather than just one man. 3 brothers, the sons of Admiral of the Fleet Sir G. R. Sartorius, were all students in the mid-1800s before each of them entered the army. 2 of the brothers, Reginald and Euston, each received the Victoria Cross for their actions. Reginald in 1874 during the Ashanti War and Euston in 1879 during the Second Afghan War. They are one of the very few sets of brothers to be awarded the medal. But that left only one recipient of the Victoria Cross not to be recognised at the school. This year, to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the college, that will be put straight and a 5th house is to be formed.
The house system plays a key role at Victoria College. Pupils are fiercely proud of their association with Sartorius, Bruce, Dunlop or Braithwaite, and competition is fierce. Badges and ties are worn with pride, and to many there's a real sense of belonging. If your father went to Victoria College, then you'll follow in his footsteps and be put in the same house that he was. Each house is named after an old boy, and photographs of them line the college walls.
Up until recently, this chair was one of the only references to an old boy who won the Victoria Cross, but now that's all about to change.
To mark the college's 150th anniversary, a new house is being created in honour of Alistair Macready Diarmid.
Whilst he was here at college, he was only here for a couple of years. He excelled at cricket. He was so good in cricket, in fact, that he gained his colours for bowling. And he then was called up and went to war. And whilst he was fighting, he used his skills at bowling to throw grenades at the enemy, and after an advance and a retreat and yet another advance, he managed to drive them back. So that's one of the reasons why he got his VC. And he was, in fact, the last of the old Victorians who hadn't been recognised, so we thought it was appropriate that we'd use his name.